Hey everyone, it's Karen at Worldschooling Central. Do you worry about the negative impact that school is having on your kids? Welcome to Worldschooling Spotlight, where I interview worldschooling families and have them share their real life adventures with you. In today's interview, I talked to a mum who had a wonderful experience at school, but on the other hand, her husband had a horrible time and didn't want his kids to go through the same experience. Watch this to find out more. Meet the Ballantyne family, a family of 4 from New Zealand who began Worldschooling out of a strong desire to give their children the very best possible education, customised to suit their individual needs and learning styles. Before having her own children, Mum Laura had a background in education and had worked with many different children over the years. Her personal experience at school was very positive. However, when she and her husband began discussing schooling for their own kids, she realised that his experience was quite the opposite, and both were determined to create a positive learning environment. Like many families, Laura and her husband wanted to travel more, but found themselves in the cycle of daily life, putting off their goals until later in life. After Laura was confronted with a serious medical condition and they lost a family friend in an accident, both Laura and Matt decided to embrace life and live every moment to the fullest. In today's interview, Laura talks about how they got started, what it costs per month, and the nitty-gritty of daily life as a worldschooling family. If you dream of getting out into the world but worry about the logistics of making it happen, Laura has some great advice for you, and this is one interview you don't want to miss. Let's meet Laura now.
My name is Laura. I'm married. My husband's name is Matt, and we have 2 children, Ella, who's 4, and Jack, who is 2. We're from New Zealand, though I was born in England and I grew up there before I moved over to New Zealand with my family.
So tell me, when did you guys start worldschooling?
So we started Worldschooling December last year. We left New Zealand, but in terms of the concept of Worldschooling, we've really been doing that since my daughter was born. When I was pregnant with her, I heard about it. I also love things like, unschooling, and I just Worldschooling sounded incredible.
What were the reasons you decided to start worldschooling?
A combination of things. I personally did really well in academic school. My husband didn't. He learns more with his hands and he learns in a different way. So he really did not enjoy school, and listening to his experiences when mine was so good kind of made me think, maybe the mainstream education system isn't actually beneficial to all children. I also was a nanny before I had my kids, and I worked as a governess in Australia. So basically I was a nanny, but I also homeschooled the kids. So doing that and seeing the different ways that I could teach them that weren't just sitting in a classroom, really opened my eyes. And I thought, wow, this is something that I think would be really beneficial for my children. And then tying the travel aspect into it, I think travel for kids is just incredible. And I wanted to make sure that my kids grew up tolerant and kind and seeing people instead of gender and age and race. And so you kind of, mash all those things together and you come out with Worldschooling. And we had a couple of things that happened. We did go through that whole kind of period where we were like, what are we doing with our lives? Are we happy? We want to be traveling, but we've kind of put a block on it ourselves to say, well, we can't go traveling because we've got 2 small children. So we're just going to stay here. We're going to buy a house. We're going to live this normal life, which was not what we wanted, but what we felt that we needed to do now, especially because we had children. We had to give them stability. We had to give them a home. These were all these things that we felt the pressure to do. So we did. Having something like that happen where I could have potentially had a cancerous tumor, we were like, why are we living this life that we're not really happy with? Because that's what everybody else thinks we should be doing. Life is short. You never know. And then my husband's best friend, he passed away in a motorcycle accident, which was another really devastating experience for us. And we'd kind of always said, well, we can travel and we can world school our kids, when they're older. We're young and we're healthy. And it was like, okay, we're young and we're healthy, so we can travel later. That's why we're not doing it now. But are we healthy? Because I was healthy until I found a lump in my thyroid, and then I have a tumor and maybe I have cancer. Then I'm not healthy. And that happened pretty quickly. And same with, Matt's friend, he's young. Well, he's young. He's, that didn't stop a terrible accident happening and taking his life. So being young and healthy doesn't actually mean that you have the time to take. So you're living your life for you. then again on that, you should be living your life for your husband or partner that you've chosen to spend the rest of your life with, and your children. And so if you're making decisions because of what you think other people think you should be doing, or what you think is best for them because everybody else says it's best for them, but it doesn't feel right to you, what's the point?
How did you first discover Worldschooling?
If I had to pinpoint it, it'd probably go back to when I was working as a governess and I was teaching the boys on the cattle station, because that was the first time that I had been involved with any type of non-mainstream education. I was mainstream educated. I went to university, didn't finish my degree because I didn't like the mainstream education model. And yes, I'd say that's probably where I would have first found out about it, but I don't really remember a specific moment or anything that triggered that.
How would you define Worldschooling?
Worldschooling in itself is an idea. Like, generally I think worldschooling and I immediately think families who travel the world and school their kids while they travel. Like, that would be my kind of, if I had to block it all down. But I also think it's a concept. Like, you can world school at home, you know, like not everybody has the freedom to be able to just travel around the world. So there's no reason why you couldn't homeschool your children but still world school them, or even really put them into traditional school and still kind of world school them if you're schooling them, I guess, coming from a place of like the world and wanting them to learn about the world, to be a citizen of the world, not just a member of their community, which is of course important as well. That's what I think world schooling is. I think it's just a way of teaching your children, and you can do it while traveling the world or while living in one little tiny part of it.
So once you decided to start Worldschooling, what steps did you take to prepare?
So we will probably be a bit of a unique case. We booked our flights from Auckland to Penang one way with no plans to come back in August, and we left on the 6th of December. So we were very, very quick. It had been something that we'd been discussing about for probably a year to 18 months beforehand, but it had always been this discussion of, wouldn't it be awesome to do this? How could we do this? What would we do for work if we did this? It was just general conversation. It was never really like, yeah, we're doing it. So the previous year in the October, we had sold our house in Tauranga and moved up to a rental in Auckland. So we had gone from a 3-bedroom home to a 2-bedroom little unit. So we'd kind of downsized quite a bit just from that. Matt is minimalistic to the core. Do you see me roll my eyes? I swear he would live in a white box if he could, like a white box with a beautiful view, and he'd be set. Like, he doesn't place any importance or attachment onto things, and I am sentimental as anything. I have the little, you know, the wrist bracelets. I have a wrist bracelet from when I went into hospital when I was pregnant with Ella and I had some bleeding and was worried I was going to miscarry. I kept that. And he's like, why would you keep this? I'm like, because it's a memory and it's sentimental. And he's like, it's some plastic and a piece of paper. Like, don't you have the memory in your brain? Why do you need this random useless thing? And I'm just like, leave me and my stuff alone. So we'd already kind of gone through that when we moved. Matt was like, we've got a bedroom less. The lounge is half the size. The kitchen is half the size. Our storage was half the size. He's like, we're not bringing all this stuff. So I'd culled a lot of things then. I'd also left a couple of boxes full of stuff at my mum's house in her storage because I wasn't getting rid of my sentimental things. So we didn't have as much as, I guess, if we had have started from that point, it would have been a lot more challenging and a lot more time consuming. But because we'd already had a bit of a clean out, I guess a year ago, it was easier. All we own is, we've got one big hiking backpack, we've got 4 we call them like day bag backpack style ones, and I have 2 boxes, like 72 litre plastic boxes at my mum's house. Majority of that is filled with sentimental stuff, and I also have a bunch of clothes that I left there because I'm sentimental about clothes too, so I just kept those because I wanted to, and they just hang in my mum's spare wardrobe. Yeah, so we sold everything. So if you weren't selling everything, like we've got like throughout this process, we've met a lot of people who are just traveling for 3 months or 6 months or a year, and a lot of them, like, they rented out their house and they just put all of their stuff into their garage and they've just locked the garage. So for them, leaving was just like going on a big holiday. Like, they didn't need to sell anything or cancel accounts or change this or update things as much. So I think if that was what you were doing, it would be a lot easier. But when you're selling everything, yeah, it's huge. It's a massive undertaking and it's scary. Like, yeah, like I said, we sold everything, nothing to come back to. But that's how we wanted it, because we kind of thought if we didn't throw ourselves into it, and we, in the back of our mind, we were like, oh, well, if it doesn't work, if we, you know, our like worst, you know, worst case scenarios, if our worst case scenario happens and we run out of savings and we haven't started making money online yet, we can just come back to New Zealand and slot back into our life that we're not happy with. I think that was a big difference. If you're happy with your life but you just want something different, you can just kind of leave it as it is and then go. Whereas we were like, we don't want to come back to this. So if we leave it there as a safety net, we have less incentive to make the other things work. Whereas with now, you know, you wake up one day and we're like, oh, you know, we could just go to the beach with the kids. And it's like, well, no, we can't, because we need to start earning income so that we can keep traveling. We don't want to get to the end of our savings and have to go back because we have nothing to go back to. Yeah, so that's hugely motivating.
What questions or fears did you have before you decided to world school?
Every single fear possible, from the tiny things, like, what if my kid fell over and scraped their knee? And I am not a helicopter parent. I'm like off you go for a run. Well, like, obviously, no, not through the street, but like you go to a park and I'm like, off you go. You know, my kid falls over and scrapes their knee and I'm like, oh, you fell over. Are you okay? How do you feel? Is your body hurting? Do you feel sad? You know, like, I'm not a helicopter parent at all. And I was like, oh my God, what if my kid falls over at the park and they scrape their knee? What would I do? And Matt's like, same thing you do here. Like, what, is this really a question? And I was like, well, yeah. And then obviously the big things, like, what if there was a terrorist bombing? What if there was a tsunami? What if there was an earthquake? What if there was a volcano eruption? What if there was a gun shootout? Like, I went from like the tiny little things like my kid scrapes their knee to the really, really big, scary things. And I think that I do think when you have children, you do that a lot more, because it's not just about you. You're like, I've always been quite anxious. Matt has not been, but he's definitely said that since we had Ella and Jack, he questions things a lot more and he thinks about things a lot more, because before he was like, it was him and he's fine. Whereas now he's like, oh, hang on, what about the kids? What if this happens? What do I do with them? And it becomes a bit more, I guess, a bit something that consumes your time a little bit more. So I had all of those fears. Like I said, if you could name a fear, I'd probably thought about it. For me, it was being realistic, like statistics. Statistically, what is the chance of these things happening in these countries that I'm visiting? Little things like, we're quite natural with our health, so we bought a few of our things that we would use at home with us, so that then we've got that safe and it's familiar. Looking up, like, you know, when you're going to a country, what illnesses are prevalent? Is there anything we can do preventative wise, or is there anything that we should bring with us? Being street smart, so looking up like, what are the scams in this particular type of country, what things often happen, so that you're knowledgeable, because I'm definitely a person who believes that knowledge is power. So the more you know, the more you can, I was going to say prevent things. You can't prevent things, but the more you know, the more you can kind of combat it. Like, if you know that this is an area in this city that is deemed not safe, don't go there. If you know that this country has a really high chance of having this particular thing that you don't want to be involved in happen, don't go there. Just things like that, picking countries that you feel safe in.
So what were the first few months of world schooling like for your family? So
we're traveling in the outbreak of it, like we left December and that's when it all kind of started. So like, pick the best time to start doing this. So that's been like, obviously, you know, one of those kind of big random fears that I had was, you know, what if there was some mass outbreak of some disease or something and you're in countries where the medical care isn't adequate, or you know, like that, we're in Vietnam, and I literally was just reading this morning how they're not letting any more tourists into Vietnam as of the 15th, which is tomorrow, I think. We're actually planning to leave. We've just booked tickets to London, and we leave tomorrow to go to Kuala Lumpur, and then we're flying out because that was the cheapest and easiest way to do it. So we are currently traveling and living in this panic. And so that was definitely something that I was fearful of. I am way less fearful right now than I would have assumed I would be if you had have said to me, so when you're traveling, this, what are we now, epidemic is happening, and you're going to be like in a country that doesn't have as good a medical care as you're used to, in a country where they barely speak English, so when you can't get the things you need, like the medicines that you usually use at home for illness, you don't have access to now. I would have been like, no way, like not happening. I would be terrified, and I don't feel like that at all. And again, I think knowledge, realizing that these things are going to happen and you just need to prepare for them, and you need to be thinking critically, and you need to be paying attention to like what's going on in the media to a small extent, because they love to sensationalize, but also what's actually going on where you are, what is happening, what decisions, again, coming from an empowered place rather than I'm scared, what do I do? Be like, this is the situation, what can I do? You know, like what will make me feel safe? And for us, we've decided to go to the UK because for us, I mean, it was a multitude of things. Like I'm personally not overly concerned about the virus when you look at the statistics. We're young and we're healthy, so statistically we're unlikely to catch it. If we do catch it, we're likely to recover.
What is your monthly world schooling budget?
Okay, so cost of living for me is something that's really easy because we keep a really detailed budget. Basically, since we've been in Malaysia and in Vietnam, we are spending over the course of the whole month, which includes our flights, which I spread out over the period that we're in a country, our visas, our accommodation, our food, our activities, and our travel insurance each month costs us the same as we were spending in rent in New Zealand. The fact that that's even possible is insane. And I think that is a big block for people. I know it was for me, being like, oh, well, traveling is expensive. Because holidays are expensive. You go away for a week's holiday and you spend thousands of dollars. I have friends who spend $10,000 on a 5-day holiday for their family. But traveling as a lifestyle, even if it's for a smaller period of time, is very different to traveling for a holiday.
So what qualities have your kids developed whilst you've been world schooling?
My daughter's 4, and if you like lean the vacuum cleaner up, she's like, I'm going to do the vacuum cleaning, I'm going to clean this, I'm going to tidy everything up. I can guarantee in 5 years' time, and I'm like, do you mind cleaning this up? She'll be like, ugh, no. Like, because you're being asked to do something, you're just like, especially as a child, you're like, I don't want to do that. And there's not many opportunities for children to kind of exercise their control and their choice. So if you ask them to do something, they can say no. You can then force them to do it, bribe them to do it, whatever, but they have still taken that opportunity to make a choice. And usually they'll choose the choice that they think you don't want them to choose, just to create like resistance, because they want to see if they can make a decision and you'll respect it. And I think it comes the same with schooling. Once you say, get up and go to school, sit in front of a board, learn this way, read this, do this, don't ask questions.
What do you know now that you wish you'd known before you started world schooling?
Well, in terms of the fears, like none of the big ones have happened. All of the little ones, like general little ones have happened. My kids have fallen over, they've got a mosquito bite, they're okay. But because I knew what to do. When they fall over, behave the same way as I would at home. There we go, that was easy. Like when they get a mosquito bite, just watch them, know the signs and things to look out for. That definitely helps.
So what's next?
So what's next for us? We are currently in Vietnam. We were supposed to be here until June, and we've decided to leave just because of the panic aspect. We're a bit worried about what would happen if there was panic here. So we are flying to Kuala Lumpur tomorrow and then on to London Monday. My sister lives in London and I was born in the UK. We've got lots of family and friends there. So we're really excited to go over and spend probably about 6 months in the UK. We're looking at workaways, which will be really cool. Our kids have, Ali used to go to kindy, so she's kind of missing like daily interaction with kids. So it'll be cool for us to do that. So yeah.
To someone watching this, what would you say if they're considering world schooling?
Do it. That's what I would say to you. It's kind of hard because when I was in that stage, I wanted someone to be like, do step 1, do step 2, do this. I wanted like a nice, pretty little guided plan to follow. But it's now that I'm on the other side of it, you can't do that. Like everybody's life is different. No one's going to be able to, unless you get like a coach, I guess, like to specifically help you with your particular issues, but like things that you need to do. Yeah, just do it. Maybe make, I don't know, maybe like I guess what I did, I made the list of all the things that I was fearful was and became either unfearful of them or was just a bit more realistic with the fear. I kind of was like, where would I like to go? How much would it cost? What do other families spend? The concerns, write down all your questions and then answer your questions. So like, how much will it cost us? And then go and look, go and talk to Worldschooling families, go into the Facebook groups, use the Worldschooling Central website, find out, you know, the answer to those questions. And then once you've answered all those questions, so just answer one question a week, one question a day, like whatever, however motivated you are to do it in a way that works for you. And then when you've got all those questions, you'll be able to look at it and go, okay, well, these are all the questions that I had, these are all the things I was fearful of, and here are the answers for everything. And then go back through and work through them again. Okay, so it is something we can afford. Okay, I was worried about this, now it's not. And then once you've got that done, pick a date. I mean, we were kind of like pushed. We picked a date 4 months away. It was less than 4 months away because I'm sure it was the end of August that we booked it. We didn't really have much choice. Like once Matt said to his boss, I'm not coming to work from this date, and we told our landlord we're leaving, you don't really have any many choices then, you just have to do it. So that's where I think the just do it comes from. Like, yeah, get your, eggs in a row, ducks in a row, ducks in a row. Get your ducks in a row. Ask all these questions, feel confident about it, decide where you want to go, decide on your budget, all those kind of things. But those are things that you can do without actually making a plan. You could just be like, wouldn't it be amazing if we could do this, and make this kind of plan that you're like, oh, well, you know, if you're in that space, be like, oh, well, we could never do it. But if we did, this is how we do it. And the more that you do the little things, the more realistic it'll become for you, because you'll realize that it actually is achievable. And like, talk to the families. That's been the biggest thing for me, is talking to other people doing it. I am a normal person. I went to university and I dropped out because I didn't like it. Ella was born when I was 23. I've been with Matt since I was 18. Matt's a builder. He's as Kiwi as you get. He likes barbecues and beers. And rugby. God, don't let him know that I almost forgot to say rugby. We're just normal people. Like, we're young. I'm 28, Matt's 29. Like, we don't have tons of money behind us. We don't, you know, like, we're literally just a couple who wanted this. And so we've figured out how we can make it work. And that's just what you do. If you want to do it, you'll hit a point where eventually you'll want it enough that you will do it. And if you're still letting things stop you, or you're letting those blocks and you're not working through them, then maybe you're just not ready yet. Maybe it's time for you. And you just need to wait a little bit longer, learn a bit more, do little small Worldschooling things, go on a trip for a month and see if you like it.
To connect with the Ballantyne family and families just like this, join our Worldschooling Central community on Facebook. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel and visit www.worldschoolingcentral.com.